Hi, welcome class. It's my first time trying this, so take it easy on the criticism. They will improve. Anyway, um, so this is chapter 24, Ireland and the European Union. And you can get this from my website, mrmcgarry.weebly.com, under LC resources. You'll see it there under CH24EXP. Okay, so Ireland, the European Union. Well, at the moment, bang up to date, as you know, we have the virus, and at the moment, people are giving out that the EU haven't been working properly together to try and help certain countries like Italy, where the pandemic hit particularly bad heights compared to other countries. So a lot of people criticising that the European Union should have one single strategy to deal with it, and that all countries should follow. And now people are worried that it might break apart, because as this virus kicks in, people are thinking more on an individual basis and looking after their own citizens, etc., etc. So the EU is basically a group of countries that are joined together. Ireland was a member very early on, and we hold quite a bit of sway in Europe as a result. We've had presidencies over the year. And what the European Union does is it's basically a collection of countries that work together for common trade, to make businesses and doing trade between each country a lot easier, so there's a lot less red tape. Some laws overlap. Obviously, if you were working on your own for things like climate change, you wouldn't be able to solve that problem on your own. So the idea behind unions, whether it be the EU or say NATO or the United Nations, is for countries to join together with a common purpose and work towards things that they can help each other with, such as climate change. If we have a common plan for climate change and we have certain targets set by the European Union that we all have to reach, and then we get fined if we don't reach them, obviously that works well for a type of situation where you have more than just one country working on its own. So from that perspective, the European Union is good. I suppose the downside is people don't always work together, and people often have their own interests at heart. And some people argue that because Germany is maybe the biggest power in Europe with the biggest population and arguably the biggest economy, some people argue that countries like Germany and France perhaps have too much power. But anyway, so you're often asked the question leave and start to evaluate the European Union. So it's good to give your opinions on it. Anyway, so Ireland and the European Union, and it's from the Business Express slideshows. Okay, so first off, they show you a company called Kingspan. And Kingspan is a great Irish company, and just to know, it's a PLC, so it's a public limited company, which means it does a lot of business around Europe and around the world. And has its base in Ireland, and it's a building materials company. So it's involved a lot in building materials. Okay, so what's the European Union? So the European Union is an international trading bloc and political alliance of European nations designed to promote closer political, economic, and social cooperation among its members. So politically, the ministers will meet up. Say, for example, the finance ministers might meet up from each EU country, and they might decide ways to tackle banking, for example. And then economically, they might meet up together again. It might be the finance ministers, because that would be their speciality. Depending on what minister, it might be the Minister for the Environment. They might meet up and decide on plans for the environment. Socially, ministers will meet up. Sometimes the Taoiseachs, in other words, the leaders, and not always called Taoiseachs, so the leaders of each individual European country will join together and decide what way to go forward for the European Union. Okay, so each member country contributes tax revenue towards the cost to run the EU, and in return shares economic and political policies intended to benefit all its members. Okay, so each country gives tax. We have to give tax towards Europe, goes into a fund of Europe. Of course, you have accountants in Europe, you have finance people in Europe, you have loads of people working for the EU. You have different parliaments, and you have different councils, and you have different bodies within the EU, and they all cost a lot of money to run. In return, we get you know, ideas from different EU countries. We get some economic benefits. For example, sometimes they'll give us funding for building new roads, etc., etc. Okay, so if you have any questions, make sure you email them to john.mcgarry@stjosephsrush.com. Also, I'll be putting this into an Edpuzzle. So what I'll try to do is, after a number of slides, I'll put a question in and see if you can answer it, and then you respond, and it'll be up on a file down in Edpuzzle on who completed what and how much of the video you watched and how many questions you answered, and all that's kept then on file within Edpuzzle. Okay, so chapter 24, Ireland and the European Union. So how are EU policies and laws made? So it starts with the EU Commission, which is like a civil service. You know, in Ireland, we've got a civil service, which is basically the people who run the country administratively. So they're people who work in offices around Dublin and Ireland, working for the Department of Education, Finance, etc., etc. But you also have one in Europe to look after the administrative side of Europe. Okay, then you've got the Council of Europe, and that represents national governments, and has even more power again. And the EU Parliament then represents UE citizens. So you get a lot of people elected to Parliament, so they're called the MEPs. You'll see them up in posters in Ireland. So we send a certain amount of the MEPs, or members of the European Parliament, to this EU Parliament, and they'll speak on our behalf. Yeah. Okay. How are new EU laws introduced? Well, first of all, the EU Commission proposes a new law. So, say, for example, we're going to bring in a new law to increase or reduce carbon emissions by 10% instead of the current 7%. So that could be proposed as a new law by anyone. It could be any country. And then the EU Commission consults with the EU Parliament and interest groups. So it'll talk then with the people in the EU Parliament, which is the MEPs, the members of the European Parliament. And interest groups just means big organizations like farmers groups or climate activist groups, etc. Yeah, number 3 then, EU Commission redrafts proposed new law. So what that means is they redo it. So it'll start with the Commission, then they'll discuss with Parliament, and then the EU Commission will redo it. So they'll have a look at it again and maybe edit a few bits and then put it into maybe better language and maybe a few extra points or take away some points, and then they propose a new law. If they're happy, then both sides are happy there, what will happen then is it'll go to the EU Council, which is an even more powerful organization, and the EU Council then can approve a new law. Okay, so after that then, the EU Commission and national governments implement those laws within Europe, and then within the national just means the Irish government is the Irish national government, you have the French national government. So within national governments, then they'll have to also implement them in the individual countries. Okay, so that's an example of, in your book, a case study about motor Harley Davidson cycles. And yeah, it's good to read the case studies. They're not your priority. Your priority, as I was saying, on Schoology is to concentrate on units 2, 3, and 4 of your exam papers, because they're the units that are going to come up in the Leaving Cert exam. And of course, any case study and any business documentary or news item that you read is adding to your overall knowledge of business, and you need to be able to express opinions in business. So the more you know about business, the better your exam is going to go to. Okay, so you can read that case study in the book on Harley Davidson. So what is the role of special interest groups in the EU decision-making body? So we said special interest groups are people like, say, the Farmers Association, maybe climate activists, maybe those type of groups will go into ministers and commissioners and members of the European Parliament and try and lobby. And that means they'll talk to them and they'll negotiate with them and they'll try and get something better, say for the climate activists, something better for the farmers, for the Irish Farmers Association, for example, or and then setting up offices in Brussels and Strasbourg. So what they do is a lot of those interest groups set up special offices. So the climate activist group might have an office in Brussels, so they can have people knocking on the door of the ministers and the commissioners and MEPs constantly to try and get their way. These interest groups also use PR, that's public relations. In other words, they'll get into newspapers and the social media to try and push favor for their particular ideas and laws they might want to try and get these people to introduce for them. They also organize protests and public demonstrations, again, to try and highlight issues and then get the likes of commissioners, ministers, and members of the European Parliament to negotiate, talk about them, maybe bring in things that are going to help the different interest groups. Okay, so next slide. So what are the main EU policies? You've got a single European market, which means sometimes that's shortened down to SEM, and that can be an abbreviation in one of your questions, short questions in exam. But it means that you have a single market, which means you can trade and do business a lot easier with, say, Germany than you could do with, say, China, because China aren't part of the European Union. So in other words, if you were exporting to China, there'd be loads of red tape, loads of documentation, loads of issues with importing, exporting, changing laws, etc., which makes business a lot more difficult. Different language, of course, as well. In Europe, there's a lot, all that red tape is broken down, and what they want to do is encourage different countries within Europe to trade and do business very easily with each other. So we can buy and sell stuff from the EU with ease. Okay, so the European Monetary Union. So to facilitate that, what they did was they brought in a thing called the euro, which is our currency. So obviously, if you've got the same currency in the past, you had the franc, for example, in France, and you had the Deutschmark in Germany, so they're all different currencies. So that made it complicated. You had to work out the maths on it, see the exchange rates, see how much money you were winning or losing after exporting or importing. Now it's a lot easier. You have the euro, so everyone can see the prices clearly, and buying, selling, and selling becomes a lot easier for everyone. So it's part of this whole EU idea, yeah. Social policy. So social policy means how do we make Europe a better place for its citizens? How do you make the standard of living better for everyone? Okay. The common agricultural policy. Well, how do we maximize and get the best out of our farmers so that we're all working together and we're not all producing the exact same thing? There's no point all the farmers, say in the whole of Europe, all doing dairy, for example, and then you have no agricultural vegetables and what have you. So what they'll do is they'll say, right, you're a good country for producing that, you should focus on that, this country should focus on that. In other words, they try and play to each other's strengths and so that they can sell and buy from each other again. The environmental policy, as I was saying, it's currently at 7%. The carbon emissions, they want the idea is that to keep emissions below 7%, and currently the Green Party are talking about getting into a coalition government with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and they're looking for targets to be set for CO2 emissions. In other words, emissions from fossil fuels, coal, oil, etc. Okay, so structural policies then. So in other words, Europe has often helped us with building roads and bridges and different business types and building types and ICT plants, etc., to be able to make jobs, make money, and modernise Ireland. And not just Ireland, but they'll invest in new entrants into the EU as well and try and build them up structurally as well. And then competition policies. So they also bring in anti-competitive laws within Europe to make it possible to compete. So, for example, Lidl was allowed to come into Ireland, even though it's a German store, and you know their own Irish stores would be Super Value and Dunn stores. But now we're part of Europe, it allows stores such as Lidl, a German store, to come in and compete directly with the Irish supermarkets. And of course, the same for Irish shops and retailers who want to sell in Europe. They're allowed to do that. And the big advantage to Ireland there is we're only a small population of about 3.7 million, include Northern Ireland, maybe around 5 million. So that's not a lot of customers if you're a big company like Kerry Group or Kingspan. So they'll want to expand and they'll want to buy and sell products across Europe, because Europe would have a population of maybe around 400 or 500 million. So you can see how many customers you could have as a company and how cool that would be for you if you were a PLC wanting to buy and sell products abroad. Yeah. Okay, so competition policies will be there to try and allow healthy competition between companies within the EU. Okay, so what are the benefits of EU membership to Ireland? Well, one of the benefits is we've had access to a large and wealthy market, as I spoke of, about 500 people in Europe. Less bureaucracy, which means less red tape. In other words, easier to import and export. Membership of the Eurozone, access to business and agricultural grants. Yeah, we often get grants for agriculture. In fact, some of our farmers get grants for growing trees on their land to help with climate change as well. Yeah. But there'll be all sorts of grants for businesses, and to our maybe Enterprise Ireland will get some grants to set up certain businesses that they think will be good going into the future. Of course, there's talk of the economy changing completely into a more sustainable economy after the new government gets in place in Ireland. Some people believe that the current economic model is more medium term and maybe isn't set up in a way that would be good for long term. For example, a lot of companies rely on oil and fossil fuels, which are finite. In other words, they'll run out eventually. And also the impact of farming on nature and soils, and people think that's not going to be able to just continue. So what they're talking about now is a new economic model, more renewable energy, more care for the environment, more quality of life for people. It's not just people rushing around in very busy jobs and not having enough time for a better quality of life. Okay, so I'm on the point there for employees. So for employees, jobs in exporting firms include transnational companies who set up European operations in Ireland. So the benefit of being in the EU for Ireland is we've the likes of Google and Microsoft and Intel and loads of different big multinational companies, or you can call them global companies, transnational companies, and they set up some of their headquarters in Ireland because we're a key member of the EU, because we speak English, because of our educated workforce, because of our low 12.5% tax rate, but also, again, because we're part of the European Union. And obviously that makes it easier for those businesses then to do businesses within the European Union. Okay, so for consumers, the use of a common currency, increased consumer choice, and strong consumer legislation. And so what they're saying there is the EU membership to Ireland is good for consumers, in other words, you and I that go and buy stuff, because we get to use the same currency. Say we're going online and buying stuff from Poland, we can see exactly what price it is and buy it easily. Increased consumer choice, we get to have loads of different choice. We can buy from any country in Europe online. And we get an awful lot more products coming in, because obviously if it was only Ireland, we wouldn't be able to get a lot of the brand names that are made in different parts of Europe. We'd only have Irish brands if we weren't open to allowing imports in. And that'll be known, by the way, as a protectionist economy. And China went through that for a long time, where they just didn't allow many exports at all. They were very strict on what they allowed into their country. They're still quite strict, but at one point they were very strict. So a lot of the things they consumed were built and made by Chinese people. So it depends what economic model you go after. Okay, so for the economy, investing in infrastructure. Again, when you think of infrastructure, think of buildings, think of bridges, think of roads, the things that are set up to facilitate business doing their stuff. So investment in infrastructure, more responsible economic policies. So the benefits of EU membership is more responsible economic policies. In other words, in Ireland for a long time, we just used to spend. Some would argue that we still do that, but now we have Europe looking over our shoulder and saying, well, hold on a minute, you're letting house prices get out of control, you're spending too much, you're not taking enough tax on the fossil fuel industries, blah, blah, blah. So that's been good for the country, in that it keeps an eye on what our politicians are doing and helps bring them in line for what's better for Europe and the world, arguably. Again, everything can be argued in life, same with this. So stronger environmental protection. So That's true. You couldn't do that on your own. You need people to be working together globally, never mind even just in the European Union. So that's where the United Nations will come in as well, because that's countries working together, united around the world. Not every single country, but most countries in the world. Okay, so Microsoft, I've given you a case study and a documentary on Microsoft. It's up online and it's also up on Schoology. So obviously an important company, good to know about it. Do you need to know about every global company? No. I was saying maybe focus on a few. So Amazon being the biggest in the world would be an important company to know about. Google, given its big operations in Ireland, or you could use Microsoft, very big companies and important companies for Ireland. I think it's good to know about one or two of them. And then you need to pick an Irish owned and run company. And you need to remember Ryanair and Michael O'Leary being one of the best managers for reducing costs on a company and building that company to be one of the best run managed companies probably in the world. Yeah, okay. So what challenges face Ireland and the EU in the future? So there's a few issues that face Ireland, and we need to increase more exports to the European Union. We need to obey EU rules on economic management. So what does that mean? That means we need to obey rules. As we saw, rules are built into the EU, and they pass different phases, and then it becomes a law, and then we have to follow those laws. And we need to increase exports to the EU. That just means obviously we need to sell more. The more we sell from Ireland into other places, the more money our country makes as a whole. So that's obvious. So increased competition from other EU countries for transnational investment. Okay, so the challenges are here are that we're getting a lot more companies coming in from the EU competing against our own companies. So obviously, if our companies aren't up to that, their companies could take over and ours will be at a loss. The other challenges there, yeah, need to obey. So in other words, they're saying it's hard to obey the EU rules, and then they're also saying another challenge is to increase exports to the EU. It's not easy to export sometimes in terms of you need a lot of money, you need a lot of know-how, etc. Maybe you need to know something about foreign languages as well, depending on where you're exporting in Europe. So there are other challenges facing Ireland. Now, issues facing the entire European Union. So what are the problems that the EU is going to face? Well, trying to protect its euro currency, because some countries, take for example Britain, wanted to take back their own currency and have sterling. Now they're back to sterling. They've done something called Brexit, which means that they've broken away from the European Union, and they're now controlling their currency, controlling their own laws, etc., business, and the whole lot, and negotiating a new deal with Europe to try and get business working for them across Europe as well. Okay, another problem for Europe is tax harmonization. An example there is we have a tax for corporate companies, which I've said many times in class, of 12.5%. A lot of countries give out about that in Central Europe in particular, saying that we shouldn't be given the likes of Google and Microsoft, etc., such a cheap tax rate, given the amount of money they make. Yeah, and we were even known as charging them even less tax, 1% at one stage, just to keep them in Ireland. Okay, and then reform of EU decision-making bodies, and that's another problem facing the European Union, that it's hard to reform the different organizations that make up the EU, like the Parliament, the Council, etc. And you know, disagreements between different countries, different cultures, etc., etc. So that's all problematic. Reform of EU budgets, especially the common agricultural policy. So that's, let me see, reform of EU budgets. Basically, saying that's a problem for Europe, because obviously individual countries like to set their own taxes. They like to reform. They like to make their own national budgets. They don't want interference from anyone else saying this is what you can spend, this is what you shouldn't spend, this is what you should tax, this is what you shouldn't tax. So that causes problems when Europe tries to maybe interfere with budgets, individual budgets, like the Irish national budget. Right. Okay. Moving on. So. Oh yeah, now exam practice, fine. Okay, so that's it. So yeah, so in summary, what you'd want to do, you often get a question on evaluate Ireland's membership of the European Union. So you need to know, for example, what are the pros, what are the cons of being in Europe, and what's your own opinion on it, and where do you think it's going into the future? Is it going to last? Is it a good idea for Ireland? Is it a bad idea for Ireland? Is it a good idea for Europe? Yeah. So again, if you have any questions, email john.mcgarry@stjosephrush.com. And thanks for watching. And hopefully the next one will be an improvement on this one. That's the plan anyway. So, okay. Thanks. Bye-bye. Morning, class. Today I'm going to take you through the last chapter in the Leaving Certificate Business course on Unit 7, and that's chapter 25. Remember to not study these chapters in isolation, because Unit 7 should be seen as a whole, as they link together. As you see when you go to the exam papers, you'll see that the questions are divided into different sections by units. So it's important to link chapters together and to think of business as a whole. Okay, so keep that in mind when we're doing this chapter. It links very well into chapter 23 as well, okay, in particular. As you know, it's all about global business and international trade in chapter 23. And in chapter 24, we were talking about EU, and we were talking about how the EU is a good organization for helping trade and breaking down red tape within the European Union. Yeah, so this goes further now and talks about business not just within the EU, but on a global scale. In other words, internationally and around the world. Okay, right. So first slide then. So you'll see that this is an activity to do in your book, and you can do it in your book on Business Express if that's the book you have. And chapter 25, global business, is only a few pages in. So they talk about a company called Unilever. And the reason they talk about a company called Unilever is because Unilever is one of the biggest companies in the world, and it owns a lot of brand names that we'd be very familiar with. So if you look at the pictures, you see Hellmann's Mayonnaise, Knorr, Persil, Lynx Spray, Calippo, etc., etc. They're all their brands, in other words, they own them. They're a global business, so they operate in many different countries around the world, and they sell those products in many different countries around the world. Okay, so what are transnational corporations? Okay, so transnational corporations are firms that produce and market goods in more than one country. So it's good to learn off particular definitions. That'll be a good definition to learn off. Yeah, so produce and market goods in more than one country. So that means they make the goods in more than one country, and the market means they sell them in more than one country as well. So if you think of probably one of the biggest companies in the world, and we've done it as a case study, and we've sent John video links and documentation on Amazon.com. And the reason we did that is because they're literally the biggest company in the world at the moment. If not one of the biggest at least. Their market capitalization is huge. It's like in the billions of billions. We could be talking nearly $1 trillion at this stage. McDonald's as well is a huge company, as we know. We'd all be very familiar with a lot of the companies here. Adidas, for example. The ones we're focusing in class are Amazon and Ryanair, so that we have an Irish company, a successful Irish company, airline. But I mean, if you wanted to look up extra information on Adidas, might be a nice one to do it on too there as well. That's a big German company, yeah, and we'd all know it from wearing from people who wear that brand for football and sponsorship of the big football teams, etc., etc. Okay, so they're all huge, big transnational corporations, massive big companies. Okay, so moving on. What are the reasons for the development of global companies? And home market saturation, no more growth. So what they're saying there is the reason for the development of these companies, why they're becoming bigger and bigger, is because in their own markets, so in Ireland, for example, Kerry Group would be a huge company. It wouldn't be so big if it only operated in Ireland. So they get to a point where they have maximized their sales in Ireland. The population as a whole, approximately around 5 million, including Northern Ireland. And they want to expand, and the way they expand is to export and get bigger and operate in different countries. So the reason for global companies is they want to expand. You know, they're public, to become public limited companies, and then expand into different areas. Now, spread the business risk between different countries. Yeah. So the other reason why they want to go global is because if their own country isn't performing well, their economy, in other words, isn't performing well, which means all their businesses and their products and services and the amount of money that that country's making is maybe not doing so well, but maybe it is in another country. So that will give you a portfolio of different levels of risk, which is good. So if one country's doing well, you might be selling loads, say in Ireland, whereas in, say, the Congo or something, you might be selling very little. Depends where you're operating. Yeah, you mightn't want to sell into the Congo because maybe there's not a market for your product there. So that's all from market research and your experts in marketing and your marketing team to find out where to sell and where you're going to make the most profit. Okay, so achieve economies of scale. We touched on that in class a lot. Economies of scale talks about the bigger the company becomes, the cheaper it becomes to produce things, and also the more you produce in bulk, the better value you get, and also then the cheaper prices that you're going to be able to sell to customers. Because if you're getting economies of scale, everything's getting bigger. So the products per item are getting cheaper to produce. Yeah, and then you're so good and so experienced at selling stuff that your prices can reflect those economies. In other words, those advantages that you have over a small company. So you can maybe compete at a way higher level than a small company because you could force them out of the market by reducing your costs and then pricing your products a lot cheaper. Your service, it could be as well, a lot cheaper, and the other smaller companies can't compete. Okay, so avail of new global markets and opportunities. So that's the other reason for development of global companies, that they want to enter into new markets and new opportunities to make money, basically, for big companies into different countries. Faster transport and communications makes international trade easier. Okay, so now that we have huge airlines industries around the world, able to get people from A to B very quickly for, say, meetings, or if a manager needed to go and check out an operation, see how it's working, meet the staff, blah, blah, blah. And even easier again, and during this crisis, obviously, it's communications are made very easy with the likes of what I'm using here, Zoom, and people are using that a lot for meetings at the moment, along with a lot of different online platforms. Some companies, huge companies, have massive big platforms run by, say, Oracle, and different massive companies. Microsoft will set them up so that they can do their communications mostly online. So obviously that's way cheaper than getting a flight, and a lot quicker and easier to get in contact with people. I suppose the disadvantages are that you're not getting that face-to-face contact with your customers and with your employees, etc. Okay, so e-business makes selling globally easier. Well, prime example for that is Amazon. Look at it, during this crisis, it's actually outperforming every other company again. It's actually suiting it, if anything, this crisis, because people are sitting at home and they're buying lots and lots online. So e-business means electronic business. That means buying and selling online. E-business makes selling globally easier. So the fact that Amazon can reach countries in every country around the world, miles and miles apart, and easily sell to them. They've got distribution chains set up. They've got the direct link to a customer. So you and I in Ireland, but also him and her, say, in Australia or New Zealand or China or whatever it might be. So e-business is obviously a lot easier nowadays than it used to be when we didn't have the internet, etc. Called marketing. And what we looked at within that section and that unit was a marketing mix. And we said another word for marketing mix was the 4 P's of marketing. And we should know off by heart that the 4 P's of marketing are product, price, place, promotion. There's more when marketing becomes more complicated, but that's all you need to know for the exam. For example, you could add in packaging. You could add in people. Some companies do. But anyway, for the Leaving Cert, it limits it to 4 is all you need. But when it comes to global marketing mix, what you need to know is that the product, price, place, promotion all often have to get adapted or customized, in other words, which means changed to suit the local needs of local foreign markets. Now, companies operate this in different ways. So some will use a standardized marketing mix, which means they don't do an awful lot of adjustments to their brand from one country to the next. And in other companies, because of the nature of their product or service, they have to change an awful lot. Think about it. If you're selling into, say, Israel, you might have to, because they have a good standard of English, you might have to change into different languages. The symbols that you use, the colors that you use, might represent different ideas in their heads than it would in our heads. Same if you were to sell into China. You're going to be using a lot of different symbols, complicated symbols, and you need expertise in that area. So your global marketing mix is going to have to be adjusted to the Chinese culture, to its country, to its language, to the way it does business differently to us, etc., etc. Okay, and Ford here then is just Ford global marketing mix. They do a case study in the book about Ford and how they adjust their marketing mix to suit the international global market. Okay, so what is a global marketing mix? So we've talked about product, price, place, and promotion already. Okay, so global marketing means marketing or selling and finding out the needs and wants of your consumers and then selling into that need. So it means marketing a product globally, which means internationally, with broadly the same marketing mix as though the world were a single marketplace. Okay, so what they're saying there is marketing your product as if the world were like very similar, homogenous, another word for similar, and you're not adjusting an awful lot of what you do. Whereas some companies, as we said, this word here, adapt, they adapt each of the elements of the marketing mix to suit the needs of the local foreign markets. Okay, so take McDonald's, for example. McDonald's has a brand that they don't change the symbol. It's still a yellow M around the world, which you can find easily. So you're walking down a road, no matter what country you come in, that brand name is going to be almost identical everywhere in the world. More or less the same with a can of Coca-Cola. But if you get a Big Mac, for example, in France, they'll have adjusted a tiny bit in taste. They'll have added things to the menu that we wouldn't necessarily have here in Ireland. And they might run different types of food promotions at different times than would in Ireland. So it's just be aware that you might have a standardized marketing mix, and you might do minor adjustments within that to suit the local needs of the market too. So global pricing then depends on the local market. So you need to look at your pricing globally. What you charge to your Irish customers might not be the same as what you're going to charge to some of your customers in Africa. Obviously, the standard of living, the amount of wages that we get are completely different in a lot of countries in Africa compared to Ireland. So you're going to have to change your pricing to meet those needs of the local market. Global place then, that's looking at how you're going to actually distribute, how you're going to get your products from A to B within these global markets. So how are you going to get your products globally distributed? Are you going to use agents? Are you going to use licensing? Are you going to use joint ventures? That's basically getting involved with another company to help you sell in that local market. Are you going to use foreign subsidiaries? So that's basically an office. Say in China, you might employ a mixture of, maybe invite people to come from Ireland. If you're an Irish company, you want to go global, you invite maybe a manager from Ireland to go over and oversee, but you also need maybe a Chinese manager working hand in hand, and then you're employing Chinese staff. So you have a number of different variables there. You might also invite some Irish staff over from Ireland. So that's that can be worthwhile, and it can also be complicated to set up. So your distribution and how you sell and how you get your products to the market, you need to consider that as a business person. Are you going to go distribute globally directly? That'd be the likes of Amazon online. Obviously, they adjust their language, etc. When you see an Amazon screen, for example, in say Russia or China, it's going to look differently to the Amazon screen that we get in the Western world. Yeah? So, or particularly in English-speaking countries. Okay, so the brand's going to be the same, but just the language obviously is going to have to, you can adjust whatever language that you want that suits the local needs. But if you're not Amazon and you're a company that needs to go out and meet people, maybe you're in building, you need to go and check some building sites out, see what way you're going to do it, blah, blah, blah. You're going to have a local office, and you're going to have something like a foreign office working for you abroad. Yeah, could be an agent work in the country that you want to do business in, say, for example, wherever it might be, New Zealand or wherever. And global promotion. So obviously this can be a tricky one. For McDonald's, it's not too tricky. Everyone knows that brand and the Coca-Cola colors. The McDonald's colors, they are worldwide. So you can standardize a fair amount of their advertising and promotions. Obviously, you have to change the language when you're advertising to different countries, different languages. But you also have to take in the uniqueness of every country around the world, where every country has its own uniqueness, every country has its own needs, every country has its own interpretation and different understanding of different colors, different symbols, different messages. So you're going to have to do market research in that country and decide what's the best approach to getting your brand name popular and getting your products to market and getting your products advertised and sold, which is the key thing. So someone uses sponsorship. Think of the football jersey. I always think for sponsorship. You see big companies all the time written on the very front of, say, Manchester United's or Liverpool's jerseys, or Barcelona's, or whatever it might be. And it's obviously got worldwide appeal then, because people can see those soccer games around the world. So you're advertising your brand worldwide. PR, as we said, you can use social media or the news, get positive news stories about your company and your brand into the media. The media can be your social media, your newspapers, your TV, your billboards, the whole lot. The internet, obviously, there's loads of different ways nowadays to promote in various different ways on the internet to attract customers. And then trade fairs is, just say you have a company and you want to make it popular in the local, in the country that you want to operate in. Say you're trying to expand into France, for example. You might see what trade fairs are on in Paris, say, in the next few months. Then you bring your product and you bring your people over there. You create a stand in that big building with loads of different companies in it. And what you do is you try and persuade people to take on your product, buy your product, to create links with your product, maybe to develop distribution chains, develop alliances, contacts that are going to help you sell that product. Okay. Again, any questions, you email myself. I've handed out my email before, so you know it from the last presentation. Okay, Kerry Foods. So a brilliant company, Kerry Foods. It's one of the biggest in the world, if not the biggest, for the ingredients that you see. So you read the ingredients of most packages of foods. You can be guaranteed 9 times out of 10, Kerry Group have got some of their ingredients in that packet of food. So that's something to be proud of. It's a great Irish company. Very profitable Irish company, and even during the crisis, there's always going to be need for ingredients in food. So good overall company, and one worth researching. So we've got Ryanair, the airline with Michael O'Leary. This is another one, a big Irish company. If you prefer to do some work on that, what we're going to concentrate on is Ryanair and Amazon, or Google. We were saying, if you didn't want to do Amazon. Okay, so moving on. What are the benefits and risks for a business operating globally? Okay, so the benefits then are of going global are you've obviously more countries that you can sell to. The more countries you can sell to, the more sales and profits you can potentially earn and make. You can generate economies of scale, because the bigger you get, the easier it is to produce, the cheaper it is to produce. When you get into mass production of items, it becomes very cheap to make different items. If you even take the example of Country Crest, an Irish company who produce vegetables. They were recently on Grow, Cook, Eat on RT2 and on Wednesday nights. An interesting series, but tying it into this, they are a company who said they can't compete by only producing a small amount of vegetables, that they need to really concentrate on certain types of vegetables and produce them in mass numbers to be able to compete with big companies around the world, and also to be able to be up to spec for what the retailers, i.e. Tesco's, Super Value, Dunsters, what they want and need in terms of vegetable production, because they often give cheap prices into those retailers. And what they prefer to do is go direct and be able to sell directly locally to people for a better price. Anyway, so that's Country Crest. They've got economies of scale at this stage because they're producing loads and loads of vegetables with massive machinery and massive amounts of land, and they're able to get their prices down by doing that. Okay, so global brand recognition is another benefit of going global. So in other words, your brand gets known around the world. Think of McDonald's, the M sign, known globally. Think of the Nike tick. Think of Coca-Cola, the red and white writing in the middle, and the actual writing itself is a symbol worldwide now. So business strength and survival. So you're going to survive arguably better if people know your brand name and they know it's a brand name associated with quality and something that they really like. Okay, and then the risks then for business operating globally are you might not be able to meet the customer's needs properly because you're trying to sell into different countries around the world. It's not always easy. It can be hard to manage. Obviously, the more variables involved and the more languages involved, the more obviously it's more complicated. Having good people and good ICT systems can really help that. Diseconomies of scale, such as poor communications. So if you have poor ICT equipment, or you've just so many different levels and layers of management, this ties back into our other chapter when we're doing organizational structures. So if you have a poor organizational structure where communication's getting lost because you're getting so big, it's becoming very, very hard to manage and to communicate with your managers and your staff and your customers and your stakeholders. Obviously, that can be a disadvantage or risk. And then global scale risks. So what are they? They're the likes of huge ones like climate change coming down the tracks. So there's the COVID-19 virus currently happening. That's affecting all economies around the world. And that's a global risk, and that's a massive risk for these global companies. And it's a massive risk for Ireland and its global companies because there's going to be a lot of countries that are going to suffer and not going to be buying the products from those Irish companies. They're not going to be able to afford it. They might have to scale back. In other words, reduce their employees, reduce their production in those countries, and reduce their sales in those countries out of no choice, because people will be losing jobs and people will have less money to spend on their products. So those global risks are happening now. And also you'd have all sorts of global risks. You had the banking crisis not so long ago. You have things like food crisis from time to time. You've got weather patterns that change food production, for example. That's a risk as well. There's loads of global risks. There's risks happening globally all the time, different pandemics, different problems, and they impact on business globally. Okay, and if you're a global company, then obviously it's going to impact more on your type of company than if you're keeping more local. Okay, so this slide here talks about Enterprise Ireland, and Enterprise Ireland is a fabulous organization in Ireland. I use it myself, my own company, Montenegro.ie, and it's, you know, it helps me in loads of ways. It helps you with your skills in terms of how to promote your business. It helps you web design, how to build your own website if you want. It'll help you get into foreign markets if you want. It'll help give advice on those markets. It'll help give you market research that has already been done in those foreign markets to make it easier for you to trade in those foreign markets. So market research is huge because that takes so much time and money and effort from people. That's great to have an organization that has done the work for you. International promotion, they'll help you promote your brand internationally. Why? Because they want Irish companies to do well, because that helps create money, and money creates jobs and taxes, and it's all circular, and it all makes Ireland Inc. a more profitable place for everyone. So they also help with distribution chains. So they might already know someone who knows someone, and they've got links within those countries who have had successful links with Irish companies in the past, and they'll say, right, we'd recommend maybe using this distributor. It's worked well for our other Irish companies. So they have experience, and you can go to them and get advice on that. Translation services, they'll help you translate and help you know maybe the ins and outs of local cultural needs. So obviously it's worth talking to them about that before you were to enter into the new market. They give you advice on regulations. Now, regulations is a tricky one because laws and regulations are not all the same around the world. They're similar within the EU because that's what the EU wants, to make business and trade easier. But if you go to other countries outside the EU, their laws and their regulations and the way they want to do business might be very different to the way we do business in Ireland and within the EU. So you need to get advice on that. They also have grants, so that's free money that you don't have to pay back. And then they give venture capital. And what venture capital is, they invest money in your business with the hope that they're going to get a return on it. So we did in previous chapters that when you invest in a company, you invest in equity. So you take a share, you buy part of the company, and then you get paid things called dividends, which is maybe a monthly check in the post. If your company is profitable, then you get payback from that company. And then if you want to sell on your shares in future, then hopefully the company's become bigger and you've made money, and Enterprise Ireland has made money on your company, and they'd sell their shares maybe into the future. Okay, so moving on. Oh, that's it. Okay, so again, that ties up the Unit 7. I hope you've learned something and we were able to add a few key points into the slides that are there already. Again, if you have any questions, you have me online, and please use that. Service is available to you. Best luck, keep well, bye-bye. Welcome, class. Second years and first years can use this video. We're going to go through the role of media. It's chapter 10. I want to say thank you to a student of mine who made this video, and I updated and added different slides to it. And I want to show you an example of the type of presentation that a student could do and send to me. Also want to thank students who have sent me some fabulous presentations. So well done on that. Right, to begin, the contents then of what we're going to talk about in this video. Again, this video is from Strand 3. It's called The Role of Media. You'll find it in your book at the end after law. I'll also put up a link on my website, mrmcgarry.weebly.com, so you can get access to the full presentation also. Media. We're going to talk about media. We're going to talk about public opinion. We're going to talk about the evolving media. We're going to talk about digital citizenship and also the digital print that we leave behind on the internet. We're going to talk about media in democracy, how it can influence democracies and different people getting into power. We'll use examples such as America and Ireland. We'll also talk about bias, fake news, and alternative facts. Media. Media is a great way of communicating and receiving information such as news through different mediums. Different types of mediums are newspapers. We can get our information and our news from newspapers, posters, leaflets, TV, and on loads of different platforms, especially nowadays on social media. And the easiest way to remember social media is Facebook or Snapchat for students, but I'll take you through a few other options right there as well. Public opinion. Editors decide the stories that they want to tell people and what point of view to take in them. So they'll have their own bias, they'll have their own ideas, newspaper editors included. And also people writing stuff on the internet will have a bias. They'll have certain likes and dislikes themselves. That'll be hard to write an article without bringing in their own perspective on it. Advertising is a huge part of newspapers and TV programs, and they make a lot of money from advertisement. For example, the Irish Times, you can businesses can buy page ad in the Irish Times for approximately €60,000 for a full page. So that gives you an example of how the media makes money. Having said that, newspapers are starting to lose money at the moment, and social media such as Twitter, Google, Facebook, etc. are reaping all the profits as people move and switch more to social media for their news, which in my opinion is wrong. I continue to buy the Sunday Independent and the Irish Times on Saturday the Weekender, and I find that particularly to be a great read, and the stories and the level of writing quality in it is really high. So it's a great overall education. But I know when we're young, we look at different stories, different things. That's fine, just to know that there's better quality news out there that can be accessed. Okay, moving on. The development of media. Media has evolved greatly in the last few years with the introduction of e-books, that are books that you can read online. You've got streamed music now. Think of Amazon, the biggest company in the world, probably at this stage, biggest market capitalization, which means the biggest wealth behind it, and one of the biggest growing companies in the world. So a lot of people are even now with COVID-19 buying music, books on Amazon and loads of various different products, and are constantly hitting people with messages and emails to sell them stuff. Okay, and then they'll put little ads here, there, and everywhere. So everyone at this stage knows the brand name Amazon, and I'm probably not helping Irish companies' causes by mentioning names. So what we should really be trying to do, especially in these times, is to buy local and buy Irish, even if it costs a little bit more. It doesn't always, but even if it costs a little more, it helps in keeps jobs and taxes and everything in our country. Right, so e.g. Instagram and LinkedIn, for the older generations, adults working in the business world, a lot of them will use Instagram and LinkedIn, and they see them as more professional to use rather than Facebook and Snapchat. A lot of adults wouldn't use Snapchat. Okay, so moving on. Digital citizenship. Media has evolved greatly to allow us to communicate to those who we are unable to talk to face no matter where they are. So, you know, I'm using Zoom at the moment. So we've had a lot of our teacher meetings using Zoom at 80 or more teachers on the screen. You flick through the screens, you can see people, hear people. It's a fantastic medium, especially during these times. But there's advantages and disadvantages. So we'll talk more about how face-to-face time is very important for personal relationships and building friendships and building relationships, rather than spending too much time on screen time. Okay. So Donald Trump is the guy on the right. He, as you know from class, he's the president of America. You also probably know who the president before him was. I'll give you a moment to think and guess who that was. You did mention in class. Yeah, okay, Barack Obama. Okay, so Barack Obama was from the Democrats, and Donald Trump is more from the Republican Party. And he uses Twitter to bypass the TV stations and reporters a lot. In fact, the reporters annoy him to no end, and he calls everything that, a lot of what they're saying, biased news and fake news. And he's kind of famous for coining the phrase of fake news. And yeah, there's arguments for and against, because yeah, there is a lot of fake news out there. Whether Donald Trump, what he's putting up on Twitter is fake or real, has to be considered as well. And everything has to be considered. Every person who's putting up news, every writer, every editor, every piece of social media that goes up, we need to analyze it with a critical eye to see where it's coming from, who sent it, what bias is attached, and various other elements. Okay, politicians now use media in their campaigns to reach people and influence their votes. Think of Leo Varadkar. He's got a huge Twitter following. Donald Trump there has one of the biggest Twitter followings in the world. I think it could be up to close to 1 billion, don't quote me on that, but he's got a lot of followers at the moment, people interested to hear what he has to say. Some because people think it's funny, and others because they think it's interesting, and he's some great support, and then he's some people who ridicule him. Okay, so Leo Varadkar and Donald Trump have a huge list of Twitter followers. They like to get their messages out to the world using Twitter. It's one of a number of means. Trump doesn't trust the American media and prefers to send his messages directly from his office. So whether he types the actual message himself, we don't know, he might, or maybe he's busy and he gets his office, or maybe he tells someone else to write it up, etc. So yeah, just to consider that as well. Same with Leo Varadkar, he might have an office, or civil service might be writing his messages for him, or he might write in person. We don't know for sure. Okay, so bias, fake news, and alternative news. A big worry for me as a teacher is YouTube. A lot of students are getting their information from YouTube, and you know, you need to be very careful with YouTube if they're teaching you about important topics. You know, you're looking up something about, I don't know, health or something that you're interested in. The next thing, this guy or woman is up talking about, telling you why it's good or why it's bad, or various things. Be very careful with that, because a lot of those people aren't doctors, not qualified. They may or may not have the education to be talking about what they're talking about to young children. So again, it falls back on checking your sources, making sure the person is an expert, properly qualified, and it's very hard to verify that. So that's why it's always good to go through your parents and pass things by your parents to see if it's legitimate what you're reading or listening to, or if it's just someone coming up with opinions himself or herself. Okay, so a few tips here. Have you checked the source? So have you checked where it's coming from, where the information is coming from? So you need to investigate the site, what's its purpose, and its contact information. So part of the source and the reason why some of those people have YouTube videos up on different social media accounts is they make money from the advertising. So even though it mightn't be factual, and they may or may not be telling you relevant or truthful information, they'll still make money from advertising if it's popular and people just like listening to that person. Okay, so have you checked the author? Do a quick online search on the author. Is he or she a reasonable person? Is this person reliable? Is it reliable information? Is the person reliable? So if they're talking about health matters, it should be a qualified doctor. If they're talking about something to do with the virus, it should be a proper qualified person who specializes in viruses, like the good people we have on RT News at the moment. And that's part of the reason why we use the RT News app in class, because you get reliable, good information, accurate information, and it's government backed. Yeah. Word of caution there is not to spend too much time on depressing or bad news stories. Try and focus more on the positive ones, especially when you're off during this period. There's plenty of stories there. You don't have to focus on virus stories or bad stories. Okay, right, moving on. Have you checked the date when the story was posted? Old stories are not necessarily relevant to current events. What are your opinions? Are you biased? Could your own judgments and beliefs be affecting your judgment? Okay, so your own beliefs and judgments can make you form beliefs and ideas about things as well. Have you read the whole story, or have you just taken snippets of information from the story, or has the person sending the information just been very selective and not given the full story and just given part of the story? Something that caught my attention in the news recently was the Green Party. When they're on the news, there seems to be snippets in the news, whether I'm right or wrong. This is just an opinion, but the news seems to be not given the full story of what the Green Party are for, but they're highlighting issues that might turn the public against them. So they're highlighting things like it's going to cost the Green Party going to cost Ireland billions in euro to get their climate strategies in check. That they're holding farmers and car owners, etc., to ransom, which is not fully true. It's not looking at the whole picture. For the whole picture, you might have to go direct, say, to a political party's website And again, this is not just about the Green Party. It could be about Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Sinn Féin. It could be about Social Democrats, Labour Party. They all mightn't get their full story told. Yeah, and so it's important to maybe go directly to their websites to see what their head office is actually saying. What are their policies? What are their plans? And what do they intend to do? Okay. Does it have supporting sources? So has your information that you found, has it got supporting sources? Click on any further links. Does the information and the other links support the story that you're reading? Is it a joke? If it's ridiculous, it might be a joke. Find out more about the author on the site. You'll see a joke later on, a picture of a basketball, you know, massive basketball on Nace Road that supposedly has fallen onto the Nace Road. You'll see it later. I'll explain that later. Have you asked the experts? Ask someone you trust or consult to fact check the website. So again, your parents are your first port of call. Your teachers are a good way as well to ask and find out, is that fake news or is that an accurate source of information to be reading? Okay. Here's the joke visual that someone had created on a computer. So anytime you're driving down Nace Road, you'll see this massive big basketball to represent our national basketball stadium. And look what they've done. They've managed on a computer to make it look like the basketball's monument has fallen down, broken a sign, is going to crash into people on the road, right? So people do that, you know, for fun and for the crack sometimes, but obviously the other side of that is if people start believing that story, you're affecting the Gardaí and emergency services having to be called, and they could be called out to other more important matters of some of the serious disease or serious health issues, and they're now thinking that this is about to happen on that road, and they're mobilizing the resources to try and help. So but it's very realistic. It's a good example to show you how realistic writers and authors and people using cameras and videos and editing software can make something look. So this is a fake story made to look very real using edited visuals and text. Source of information. So I'm showing you this because I want students to write down what websites and links they got their information from. Again, it ties into what we're talking about in terms of bias, fake, and where we get our information from. And we've been recommending this for all our presentations, that students write down where to get your information from. And we were recommending in class, rather than using google.com, to maybe try and use googlescholar.com, yeah, which is there in the second one. And as you see, this student has written down some of the links that it used to find its information, yeah, so that's handy. And then the teacher can see, is it good information they're accessing, or is it maybe from websites that aren't going to be helpful to a student. Moving on. Conclusion then. The role of media. So we've talked about the role of media in our lives. It has just to sum up on it, it has a massive impact on our lives because we're hearing and listening and reading things all the time on our phones. Yeah, and we need to be careful not to spend too much time on phones and PlayStations and screen time. You can get maybe an exercise and take on a new challenge, learn a new instrument, maybe take on a new adventure, go for a walk. Yeah, there's loads of things we can do. But spending too long on phones kind of dominates our lives then. Yeah, and watching news all the time isn't healthy either. Recommended for the RT News app, but we recommend just every second night, maybe 5-10 minutes, have a look and see what's going on, and don't focus on all the negative stories. Okay, so it affects public opinion. So depending on what media and what news comes out, the public might decide, oh, let's vote for Fianna Fáil, or let's vote for the Labour Party, you know, during that general election. So the media there in a democracy is very important because it can influence people's vote. How media has changed. So it's changed from print, newspapers, and then with TV, satellite TV, and we now have an increase in social media, e.g. Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, websites, blogs, podcasts, and there's probably more that I've forgotten, but there's a good few to keep you going anyway. Okay, digital media, digital citizenship and digital footprint, e.g. private information or visuals. So it's very important to be aware that when we're online, top companies can track where we've been, what we've seen, and they can tailor their advertisements to our particular likes and dislikes, particularly for our likes. So they can sell us stuff based on what we've clicked on. You can also see things, and there's very little private nowadays online. Some people argue that even the webcams are that big companies around the world can access our webcams, can access our audio through our TVs and through our laptops and through our phones. And it's just be aware that if we want something private, we need to close down our laptops, switch off the phones, turn off the TVs. Yeah, okay. Media in democracy, and we spoke about how it helped Twitter and the social media campaign. In other words, the amount of messages that Barack Obama sent out, he was using a lot of social media, and he got into power as president, the first black president of America. And social media had a massive impact then on getting him elected. And it's the same with Twitter and Trump. That's having a massive influence on public, what they think of Trump and his influence over America and the world. And to a lesser extent, because we're a smaller country, Leo Varadkar and his Twitter account, and people pick up messages from that and have a think about what way Ireland's going and what way maybe it's been run. Bias, fake news, and alternative facts, e.g. YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok. I heard is another new one for students. I haven't seen it, don't know much about it. I've heard about Snapchat, all right, and I definitely know about YouTube. So yeah, you get a lot of bias, fake news, and alternative facts and pictures that mightn't be true, mightn't be accurate. So just be aware of that and be vigilant. Yeah. So on reflection, through this project, right, we learned about how the media needs to be checked if it's accurate or not, how public opinion can be positive or negative, and the media definitely influences a lot. The evolving media and how it's changing from news on print, such as newspapers, to TV, and now more and more on our social media platforms, such as Facebook, Twitter, Google, and all the rest of them. And then we talked about digital citizenship, and we talked about media and democracy, what's fair and what's the truth, yeah, and how it influences people getting into power around the world, different media and how it's used and who it's run by and who has power control over it. Bias, fake news, and alternative facts, be aware. We said, yeah, YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, just beware of visuals, beware of what's being said, and don't always take it at face value, and don't always take things to be the truth. If in doubt, show an adult, your parents or teacher, obviously being your first port of call. And see the link on the last page for an interesting video on the role of media. Oh yeah, I'll put this link together for you. I think it's set up so you can click on it. It's this one here, it's at the very end. And you'd be able to see an interesting video there on the role of media. Just if you get sick of listening to me, if someone else is listening there for, I think it's only 5 to 10 minutes. But it's good, check it out. Okay, so that's the reflection. I'm a digital. So when I'm online, I ensure that I'm responsible and safe, the girl says. And she also says, I tell a responsible adult if someone is being harmful to someone else online. And then the other student says, I protect my private information. I say no to cyberbullying. Okay, so cyberbullying is a huge problem on the internet where students are slagging hurtfully other people, making them feel bad. And obviously that's not nice, it's not kind. and that doesn't help society, doesn't help any of us. So I protect my private information. Yeah, never share your private details, your full name, address, and banking details, mobile number. You know, don't be giving that information to anyone. Make sure you talk to your parents before you're giving private information to anyone. That's a major no-no. Do not give private information to anyone who asks it online. Okay, and yeah, tell a responsible adult if someone's being harmful to them. If you don't like something, you think that's not right online, make sure you report it, say it to parents, or else that person gets away with it. Criminal, you can get away with things online, and there's plenty of criminals online that you need to be aware of. When I'm online, I ensure that I'm responsible and safe. Well, the best way is, again, check in with your parents, and they can let you know. Okay, right. Moving on then, our last slide that I put together. Let's see, questions. Okay, so you have a think about now, and you could type these up. Make sure you type in the questions themselves as well, so I can see what answer you're trying to answer. Make sure you use proper titles, please. The role of the media is the title for this, and then you put question 1, and then you write down just for short ADV and DIS. If you want to shorten it, there's no problem. But just as long as I know what the question is about. So, what are the advantages and disadvantages of the general public creating news stories, taking photos, videos, and writing things on social media? Okay, so have a think about that. If someone's reporting a story, a crime, for example, and there's someone there with a video camera, and they've snipped it or edited it, and they've maybe missed out the first part of the story or the second part of the story, have a think about how that might impact. And also think about actually the advantages of it sometimes, that you can actually maybe record stuff that the Guardian might want to see, and then there's more eyes on those people who might be doing wrong. Okay, so why is it good? Now it should be an it there. Apologies for the typo, just put an it in there. Why is it good to switch off news and not have it on 24/7? And the same goes with our phones and our screen time, basically. And why should we not spend all our time on negative or depressing news stories? And especially coming up to bedtime, you shouldn't. It's not a good idea to use your phone coming up to your bedtime. The screen time keeps you awake. You won't get a good night's sleep, and you'll be grumpy and tired the next day if you don't get proper sleep every night. So yeah, it's a good idea to put the phone down, and maybe don't go into heavy news or depressing news after 6 o'clock just before you're going to go to bed. It's not good for your well-being. So yeah, I'd stay clear of that one. Right, next one. But have a think about that, and any ideas you have, add some yourself here as well, and just helping you along here as well. So why is it good to be up to date with stories in RT News? So why do you think it's good to be reading RT News? Think about the educational value. I think some of the best education you can get is reading the weekend newspapers. If the writing's good and it's a good newspaper, good quality one like the Irish Times, yeah. But RT News, you know, is the Irish news backed by the Irish government, and you get stories on lifestyle, culture, politics, current affairs. So have a think about why that would be important why would it be important to know about things that are going on in the world. Okay, what are your own reflections about the role of media in Irish society? What do you think the media is positive or negative? And if it's positive, why is it positive? What does it do? If it's negative, how can it be negative? And what do we have to be careful of? Okay, so have a think about all of those. Type them up and then share them to my usual email. And then, yeah, you know, as usual, like we do in class. And again, you don't have to, if you want to reduce the amount of work you have to do, you can always work in your same group of 4, so we were in class, have the same manager, and you can communicate with each other using the Google Slides, and then ask your manager to post it to me. And then just put the name of each person on what slide that you did in terms of your summaries. Put them down in the bottom right corner so I can give marks for the effort individually and as a group. And remember, we mark on efforts, that's content, your creativity when you do up your summaries, basically. So you'll be doing a summary up on this using Google Slides, using your own pictures, your own words, as this student did. Again, there's no rush with any of these. The hope, I suppose, is to finish law and the role of media by the end of this school year. So do we have to get it all done? And it's dependent on the student. Some students will be able to get it done more quickly than others. Just do your best, spend about an hour a week on work, maybe 10 minutes every second night on news for your homework. And that's more than enough. You don't need to go over the hour every week on CSP. And no need. So what I ask you to do, you don't need to worry. It doesn't have to be done that minute or that hour or that week. Just keep tipping away every week an hour, and we'll eventually get all the work done. We'll be better for it. Okay, so again, any questions, concerns, suggestions, you're always welcome to email me on my email address. And yeah, thanks for your attention. Keep safe. Bye-bye. Okay, how are we doing? Welcome to my new video on exam papers. So I thought this would be useful for you. I'm going to do it on 2019. No, 2015 as well is also a very important one. And any of the Leaving Cert papers for honours you have units 2, 3 and 4. For the ordinary level, you can send me on your work and I'll continue to correct it from the photographs, give you tips and pointers, and it's a lot more straightforward. You can find the answers even more easily on this website, which I'm just about to show you. So the website that's very important for you to do well in Leaving Cert Business is this website. And it's called examinations.ie. So you Google that or type it straight in, come to a screen such as this. I showed you this in class before, so if you want to fast forward this section, do. So you click, make sure I've read the terms and conditions. You click here whether you want the exam paper for business 2019 or the marking scheme, which is the answers basically for 2019 with all the marks, how many's going for each different point. Okay, so then you type in the years. 2019 is what I typed in. Type in the subject you want, Leaving Cert Business Studies. Sorry, the last one allows you to choose a subject. So choose business, and then come down here and double click on higher level English version, and then you'll have that open. If you right click it, you can open it into a new tab, right? Because it's nice to have the answers and the questions side by side, especially when you're starting off until you get good at them. When you get good at them, obviously then don't look at the answers much, try and do it yourself. And remember, one of the biggest obstacles is time and organization. So time, a lot of students run out of time because they don't have a timer in front of them and they're not timing their questions exactly, and trying to maybe do too much on one question or one part of a question, and then they run out of time at the end. The other problem is organization in terms of making sure that you have the correct format for your answers. And that is, again, we've mentioned this a lot of times in class, state, explain, maybe 3 bullet pointed sentences to explain an answer. One of those explanations might be an example. And in most cases, when the marks are, depending on the marks they're going for it, you're going to need to state 3 explanations and an example. But depending on time, you might just put one of those examples in as your final explanation. So it's good to have examples. It shows a better understanding of your answer and how you're answering questions. So, okay, moving on. So I've already opened up these 2 files. The exam paper is there. And then we have on the next tab, we have the answer guide. Okay, so I'll maybe do a few questions, stop the video, and then do another one rather than it being too long. So what we'll do is we'll start in here, we'll have a look. Obviously, a lot of students sometimes forget to look even at the start of the exam and see exactly how much time and everything. So you've got 9:30 to 12:30. That's 10:30, 11:30, 12:30. So obviously that's 3 hours. And here is where your examiner is going to be putting in the marks for your exam, as you saw in your mock exam. And it usually starts with your short questions, which are 80 marks. Again, I've given you a lot of documentation on this on my website, and we've gone through it in class, how to approach exams and also marks going for different sections, and how to organize your answers and all. Okay, so this section is compulsory. That means you have to do it. It's 80 marks. You answer 8 questions. Each carries 10 marks each. And I was recommending that you do every question, especially if you have time, because you might think you have a question right, but it might be wrong, and then they'll pick your best 8 out of the 10. So if I was doing it, I'd often have time, and I'd do, when I was a student, I did Leaving Cert Business, and I would have done all 10, yeah? So I'd recommend students to do that. So number 1 then gives you a list of column different items, and you have to match them with the column on the right. So we'll do maybe one of these, and I'll move on maybe to section 2. So I think all the short answers are going to be very easy to find for yourself on this. So we'd be wasting time, I think, if we did any further. But we'll flick through quickly some parts, or you're going to be here all day listening and getting bored, and then we'll go through a few of the different sections, give some pointers, and pick out a question each one. So this one here we've got is a question that asks you to match up job description, norming, manpower planning, person specification, and chain of command with the list of items here. And as you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items here, whereas there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items here. So one of them won't be used. Okay, so if we look across, we need to be able to find and access all of the answers for each section. So come down, down, down is the marking scheme, in other words, the answer scheme with the marks. Again, it's important to read everything, yeah. If we move down here, we have the marking scheme for section 1. So you remember section 1 was the short, compulsory, and you got 80 marks going for that. Well, it breaks down the points for each question. So your short question 1 is broken down. You get 3 marks, then 2, 2, 2, and 1 for your final one. So you get a few extra marks for getting the first one right. And that maybe helps some students that maybe don't get the full exam finished, that sometimes they give a higher weighting on your first answer rather than your last one. Okay, and then question 2, the marks are broken down, 2 and 2 points, etc. And each time you go through each one of them, they're broken down a little bit differently, and you get 10 marks for each short question. Okay, so we move back now to the short questions, run through the next section to see if we can be of help there. So name 3 categories of industry, in the context of business, what do all the abbreviations stand for? Again, some of those come up regularly. You should have a list of your abbreviations, write them out for practice, and know them. Yeah, there's some common ones there. Explain national minimum wage, describe 1 possible impact, outline 2 problems, earns trading goods. That's a regular one there, where they ask you to do a little sum, a ratio, sometimes it can be, and other times it's maybe to calculate the balance of trade. Imports, niche marks. So as you can see, they try and give a range of questions from all the units in the book, as balanced as they can. That can sometimes pop up in short questions as well. If not, then if they don't do it in the short questions, they'll usually give you a question on the break-even chart then in the main section. Now, good tip for that is at the start of the exam papers that I bought for you, you'll see at the front, it gives you which questions came up the most often in the exam. So even though it's dangerous to predict what exactly is coming up, it'll give you a good flavor of what comes up regularly in the exams. Right, so section 2 then we know is sometimes called a case study. Some people call it a case study, some people call it an ABQ, not to get confused with it. And these are not the units that your exam are going to be based on, because every year it's based on different units, this section. So for your year, it's based on units 2, 3, and 4. and there's 80 marks going for it. And again, the recommendation here is to read it, underline key bits. But step one, as we said in class, is to read the questions first in the case study. So then you know what bits you're going to be thinking of highlighting. Okay, so you're going to be using your state, explain, and you can put an example if you want as part of your explanation, but the more important thing here is to have a link or quote coming directly from the text to back up what you're saying in your answer. Okay, so explain the term entrepreneur. And then you've got another question here, part A, outline the benefits for Emma Daly of becoming an entrepreneur. So let's now look at how they're going to break down the marking scheme for part I and part 2 of part A on the marking scheme. So if we go down here, first of all, they give you the marking scheme, okay? And then if you go a bit further down on the screen, you'll get the answers, right? Or go a bit further down, you get the answers. So explain the term entrepreneur. Using your cop on, you'd be thinking to yourself, they're not going to give me a lot of marks for just one definition. So there's 6 marks going for that. So you have to use a bit of maths in your head then. So there's 6 marks going for that. Then there's 14 marks then going for the rest. Okay, and then you have to think to yourself, well, how might that be broken down? So if they're asking for outline the benefits for Emma Daly of becoming an entrepreneur, you need to have a list in your head of the benefits of becoming an entrepreneur. So that means you need a list of states. If you don't have the states, you won't be able to explain, and then you won't have examples. So you need to learn off your states first for important sections throughout the course. Now, so your state then, so it's saying 2 at 7. So you're looking at 2 major benefits here, and you're going to get 2 for stating what the benefit is of becoming an entrepreneur. You're going to get 3 points for explaining it. So you're going to get a point per sentence or per bullet point. That's why we're always saying state, explain, 3 bullet points, and then link then. So you're going to get 2 marks for putting a quote or direct link from the case study into your answer. Okay, and yeah, so if you add that up, then you've got 2 by 7 is 14. 14 then is 6 would give you 20. So there's your 20 marks for your case study. Now, evaluate. You really need to have, on my website, you've got a list of key terms and explains exactly all those command words. If you don't understand what evaluate means, you're going to struggle to answer the question appropriately. So make sure you've looked at a file called command words on my website under Leaving Cert Business Resources. Okay, so evaluate the management activities involved in the operation of Oakfield, a lodge wedding venue. So there you got to start thinking to yourself, I need to know the management activities, or I'm not going to be able to answer this question. Okay. And remember, we were talking about the management activities. There's a little mnemonic we learn: planning, organizing, controlling. Sometimes they add in leading into that. It can be argued whether that could be put in or not. But yeah, so first of all, you need those 3 that I mentioned, and you're going to have to state them. You're going to have to explain what that activity is about. So in other words, what's organizing about. Name it as organizing. That's your first marks going for that. Then you're going to explain it, and then you're going to put your link. So the activity is just another word for a state. So you're getting 3 marks for stating organization. You're going to explain it then, and you've 2 marks going for that. And then you're going to link it back, and that's going to be 3 marks. So often explanation would have more marks than 3 usually for it. This one is just 2. So link then it's a lot of marks going for that, in that it's your 3 marks there. So you also then have additional marks that a lot of students forget about and don't write down at the end of their question. So as soon as you get a question called evaluate, you should have a section at the very end underlined, call it evaluation, and then you want to give your opinions there on, so if they're asking you to evaluate the management activities involved in the operation of Oakfield Lodge wedding venue, you would say, well, I think that their management activities were worked well because I thought organization was important, because I thought planning was important for this local wedding venue, because I think that planning, controlling is important from the financial point of view. Don't forget having resources there, stock for the wedding. But anyway, so you need to be thinking along those lines. And then if you look at the marks, again, you need to do a little bit of maths. 3/8 are 24. So you're getting 24 marks for state, explain, and put your link in. But then you're getting the last 6 marks for your heading call evaluation, where you give your overall opinions on why this was good or bad. Yeah. Okay, and again, any questions, make sure you give me an email. I've given it out to you many times. Okay, the last part is part C then, and it asks students, do you think Oakfield Lodge as a service provider has compiled, has basically gone along with the terms of the Sale of Goods and Supply of Service Act 1980? Now, I told you this is a really important act to learn and to make sure you have enough states on it and to be able to explain those states, and then you can have a few examples as well. So explain your answer using the knowledge of the law and refer to the text of the ABQ. So here then, because it says, do you think, they're giving, that's a type of question, if you aware what type of question I'm asking. So 3 9s are 27, and that's broken down with state, the point of law. So for example, you might have fit for purpose, just that on its own, that'd be your state. Of merchantable quality, that would be another one maybe. And then match description, that could be another one. And you leave it at that, but then you'd explain each of those states, and then you'd show links on whether they're being applied or not in this particular case study, right? So that's that done. So moving on. The next section then is going to be called section 3. And in section 3, very important to note is that you answer 4 of your best questions from section 3. Obviously, there's more than 4 there, you just pick the best 4. Now, there's a tricky extra little bit here in that you answer 1 question from part 1, 2 questions from part 2, because you'll see section 3 has different parts to it. So you answer 1 question from part 1, 2 questions from part 2, and 1 other question. So you can get your last question from either part 1 or part 2. And they'll all carry the same amount of marks. So the way this is broken down, part 1 is usually a question based on unit 1 in the book, and that's about people in business. And as you can see, they've asked you here, explain each of the following terms in relation to the law of contract. Again, very important, law of contract. And provide an example in each case. So explain the following terms, right? 4 at 5 marks each. And that's going to give you your 20. 4 5s are 20. And it's 3 plus 2. Okay, and again, always keep in mind, state, explain, an example. So in this case, if they've given you some of the terms, well, then you're going to concentrate more on the explanations and the examples. But if they haven't, then you want to be able to state capacity, state considerations, state legality of form, state consent contract, then give your explanations and give an example within the time. So it's only 20 marks going for it. So you wouldn't be spending all day writing out all what's in the book on capacity contract. You have to be selective with your information when you're giving answers. Okay, so you have to pick out the most important bits, in other words. Part B then of the same question, question 1, asks for 3 reasons other than pay for an industrial dispute. And again, there's 20, you need to be always look for how many marks are going for it. So obviously there's a lot more need to be written for this one because it's 25 marks. This one's only 15, this one's 20. And outline 3 reasons other than pay for an industrial dispute. So you have to come up with those 3 reasons. And if it says 3, you're obviously going to need 3. And then 3 by 5, so you're going to state for 2 and then explain for 3. And one of those sentences could be an example instead of an explanation. You still get the 3 points. So that'll be 3 5s or 15. 15 minus 25, you're going to be looking at 10 marks. Okay, so 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's adding up to 10 there. And says discuss the procedures which must be followed before an official industrial action can take place. Okay, so you need to discuss then procedures. Here we've only got 10 marks left, so you want to be listing out the procedures, the official industrial action that you can take, and again, when you have an opportunity to give an example and explain. And then, yeah, obviously only 10 marks, so you wouldn't go overboard. Okay, moving down. Evaluate the small claims procedure for resolving conflicts. Again, the pros and cons. Evaluate's a very important question. And then at the end, also, in addition to pros and cons, put a title at the bottom, underline and call it evaluation, and give your overall opinion on what you think. Do you think it's a good procedure? Do you think it's a good court? Why? Yeah. Okay, so it's 15 marks going for that. So 3 4s are 12. So you're getting your marks for state and explaining, maybe an example again instead of one of the explanations, and then 3 marks left over at the end for an evaluation. Okay, so that gives you an idea of how these questions operate. I'll just quickly go through the overall questions, and then we'll be able to break them down a little bit for you. So question 2 then is domestic environment. And again, a lot of the questions are often based on units in the book. So it's good to get used to what the units are called in your book. So go to your book and find out the units, and then match them off into the unit questions on the exam papers. And then maybe have a think about what unit are you particularly comfortable with, which one are you going to be, which 4 questions are you going to focus your attentions on in the exam. Again, if you have time, you might do an extra question because they'll pick the best one. Yeah, and that's what I'd do. Okay, so this one is talking about various different things. Marks are broken down similarly. I'm not going to go through the same thing again, but just to know that all these questions are going to be worth 60 marks. So they're all going to be broken down with similar type of marks, 20s or 25s, 15s, in and around that for each question. Okay, we scroll down more. We see question 3 is on the international environment. Now we'd be thinking there about the EU. We'd be talking about Unit 7 that I did a video on recently. So when you're thinking about the international environment, you're thinking, well, that's a question from Unit 7. So you need to get into your head which question is related to which unit in the book. Section 3, Part 2, scenario in Part 2. Again, similar type questions. Section 3 is all the same. They're all worth 60 marks. And then again, looks broken down 20, 20, 20. And same idea, you want to be given your state, explain, and examples. All the way through all these questions for Section 3. And just be aware of where the marks are being broken down. So you break those down a bit further to analyze them, and you'll get to that end. So outline the effects of decrease. This is managing business and business in action from units in the book. And again, marks are broken down there for you. Question 6. Again, there's no point repeating myself. And question 7. And okay, so then it just goes through some of the actual answers. So what we're on now is the actual answers for the full exam. So all those short questions are answered first. Okay, and then you scroll down, you wait till you get to section 2, right? There's section 2, so that's the ABQ or case study, and that'll be big long answers. That's to be nice and long. You might put in red pen the links or in bold as they've done there. You might underline them if you have time. And again, that's still, so the ABQ, you nearly want about 3 or 4 A4 pages for your ABQ answers as a general rule about that. But again, it's all dependent on time. Okay, so let's see where we are. Section 3 then, again, full answers there. You've no problem opening this up and finding the answers. And the marking scheme, remember I showed you, was up at the top, broken down quite easily. If there's something confusing though, after you've read through these answers, something you don't understand or something that you're not familiar with the marking scheme, you need to make me aware and say, sir, this is confusing. What's the story with this? That's no problem, and I'll come back and help you with it. And I think by the sounds of things, we'd be allowed into class, I think, for 2 weeks before the exam. That's as it currently stands. I don't know if that's confirmed because I don't know what way the COVID-19 is going to go. But when we know, you guys will know, and then we'll work accordingly. Okay, so there's all your answers, all the way to the bottom. Let's see if there's anything at the bottom there that I'm missing. No, that's all section 3. Going through part 1 and 2, section 3, all your different possible responses. I suppose the important thing to note there as well is it's all the possible answers. So they give you way more answers than you need, okay? So you just look at the marking scheme and you'll be able to tell how many states you need, because we've done a lot of that in class. And the rest are just extra notes. And those little extra notes there, you can pop into your mind maps and pop into your own notes to add to the notes that you have. Because these are very specific, obviously very related to the exam papers, so they're going to be very relevant. Okay, that's it. I think that's enough for today. Thanks for your attention. Hope all are well, and I hope that was helpful. Bye-bye. Hi and welcome. This is a video to help my JSCP students with their priority learning units. So step 1 is to come into my website, which you know at this stage, Mr. McGarry with mac.weebly.com. You can Google that too and it'll come up. And then you come down here and you'll see your JSCP videos 1 and 2 with the answers to the below photographs as such explained. Next thing to note is this differentiated CSP handout. Okay, so I'm going to put up a third video here and it'll be called Priority Learning Units, so PLUs. And they go through the PLUs in this handout as well, which I've created for you since the start of the year. Okay, I'm going to go on then to another piece of software just to show you what I'm talking about. So the differentiated CSP handout, okay, which I showed you from my website. This is here when you open it up. And what we need to understand, what are the priority learning units? Well, we're going to go through them, but just to note at the start here, I've said you can present your work with audio, with posters, with visual displays. So I'm very open to different ways of you producing your evidence that you're learning and that you're making an effort. Yeah, which is number 1. So I have lots of graphic organized at the handout in class, and we're also giving out handouts to level 2. But on top of that, we'll just go through a few bits here. So for CSP, JCSP, so the priority learning units then for my JCSP students are to understand, first of all, the difference between a right and responsibility. Okay. Responsibility, for example, could be to pick up litter. A right could be you have a right to education. Yeah. So there's a few elements here, activities that you can write or type out, or again, audio, whatever way you prefer. You create a poster highlighting human rights. Have at least one person on the poster with a speech bubble saying something positive about human rights. So that's one of the first things I get you to do, is to do a poster highlighting something like homelessness or any issue that you think is a big issue in Ireland. Yeah. Know the difference between a need and a want. Again, need is food. Want might be, for example, the latest fashion item. Yeah. Do a college photo collage of people that inspire you and give one comment from each. So it could be your parents, a few students, and you could record them. And you could say why you think they inspire you. In other words, why do they make you want to do things in a better way or to achieve things. Research people online who have changed the world in a positive way. So to do a little write-up, or again, it could be audio, again, open to different ideas, but to look up and research a few people that you think have changed the world in a positive way. Yeah, and to write about them and to do a picture of them, maybe get a photo of them. Yeah, moving on. So human rights instruments. This is more of the learning units that JCSP need to learn. So research and actions associated with that. So research actions that others have done to protect other people or the environment. Make a storyboard or infographic showing what action you'd like to take to protect people in the environment. So first of all, read up anything online. Use google.scholar.com for educational resources. Wikipedia is another resource. And just read about people who have done good things for the environment. You also get loads of information on greenparty.ie for Irish examples. And then you make a story with maybe some speech bubbles and reflect on what you've done in class for the strand and create an audio presentation of what you've learned then at the end. And also then it's a way of reflecting. So you can do an audio reflecting what did I learn about this first strand 1, what did I learn about rights responsibilities, what did I learn about human rights instruments, yeah, and just to do up a reflection on that, whatever format you find easiest. Okay, moving on to strand 2 then, we've got global citizenship. So within this, what I want you to do is to look up an ecosystem. What is that? So again, use googlescholar.com and then display pictures of different types of ecosystems around the world. You might see the coral reef in Australia is a big ecosystem where fish and coral have to work in unison to help marine life, but also to create oxygen in the oceans as well. Okay, but you'll see different things on ecologies and different nature reserves around Ireland where everything works together and everything's connected to everything else. So you can draw a poster on highlighting how your family leaves an ecological footprint. That means what damage basically do we do as individuals or families to the environment, yeah. For example, using fossil fuels. For example, an example of fossil fuels might be using too much diesel or too much petrol, and we could be cycling. Throwing away rubbish when we could be using recyclable Tupperware. There's a few examples for you. So part C I'm looking at here now. What can we as humans do to protect the world's environment so that it stays as a nice place to live? As a nice place to live for future generations. Okay, so what can we do to protect the world's environment? We can get involved with different organizations that are actively trying to go more green and trying to protect the environment. Eco warriors or environmental groups or Green Party groups. So we can do things at home then as well, recycling, using, reusing things, reducing what we use, reducing food waste, having a compost heap outside our gardens, taking rainwater from the roof and using that to water our plants. Things like that all help. So do actions this week of recycling your rubbish and show proof of you of cycling or walk. So get a picture of you maybe recycling rubbish into the correct bins and make maybe a formal presentation with that. You can also cycle or walk depending on your parents' permission. And just to say you did that would be enough. Be difficult to get a photograph while you're cycling, so I wouldn't recommend doing that. So, okay, so get someone to get a video of you and speak in the video, explain what you did and why you did it to help the environment, yeah, to help the world be more sustainable. Sustainable means that it'll last forever. That's not just going to last for the next 10 years or 100 years. We need to protect it for future generations. Okay, so reflections then at the end of every strand. Okay, so that's strand 2. And strand 2 is called global citizenship. And what I want you to do at the end of every strand is to do an audio or type it up and just say, what is it you learned about global citizenship and the environment and sustainability? Okay. Again, if you have any questions, you can email john.mcgarry@stjosephsrush.com. If there's any confusion, always let me know. Okay, so added to global citizenship, we can also do a storyboard on local and global development. So what we could do is we could do a story about a family that's been suffering from poverty at home and maybe abroad, maybe in Africa, and highlight the differences and similarities between poor people in Africa and poor people in Ireland. You could do a video of your local area, is a separate topic. So you video your streets in your local area, maybe using your phone, again with permission of your parents. Highlight new places that have been developed and ask people why new places have been developed. I noticed a Tesco developed in Rush. So show the new developments, what new buildings, what new things have been set up in Rush, and then have a think about maybe why they were set up. And ask people why they were set up, and then record their answers on audio again, with their permission, yeah, with the permission of your parents. Okay, so affecting global change. In addition, what you can do is create a profile of someone powerful in the world, someone like Donald Trump, the President of America, or something like the leader of the United Nations, or the EU, or Ireland, Leo Varadkar at the moment. So draw a poster highlighting the problems with climate change. So obviously a huge part of global citizenship ties into sustainability. And we know that a problem down the line is climate change. If the planet heats up by more than 1.5 degrees, people will suffer the consequences, the top scientists are saying. So what can we do to help climate change? Well, again, it's reduce, reuse, recycle, and use less fossil fuels and create more renewable energy, such as wind turbines off the coast of Ireland. And biofuels. Okay, and then what you do is after you've tried a few of those, you don't have to do them all. And again, the time frames, there's no pressure on time frames. You just tip away at whatever you can get done within class time. Yeah, so whatever you can get done within class time is great. You can get a little bit done outside of class time using your audio recorders. That'll be great, and that'll add to it. And also watching the news, positive stories in the news. RT News, use the RT News app. And for homework, what you'll be doing is doing your little bit of audio clips and doing your little bit of news, positive news stories on RT. Okay, now moving on, the last strand then, and again, CSP is done over 2 years, used to be over 3 years. So there's still 3 strands. And again, if you're struggling to get everything done, aim for a realistic target for yourself. So maybe half of the work there. If you can't get the full amount done, if you can get the full amount done, great. If you can't, try and get half it done. And again, you do it during class time. And you can do a little bit outside of class. And never do too much. You don't be doing more than maybe an hour a week on CSP class time, and no more than, say, 10 minutes every second night for homework, okay, and revision. So, explore democracy. Some ideas here of what you could do in the JSCP club. So, explain how democracy works in your school. So, do people get elected into power by vote? Or how do year heads get jobs? How do principals get jobs? Etc. Do a graphic. So that can be an infographic, just means a picture or some diagram showing how Ireland is ruled. So who's at the top of the chain? Leo Varadkar, we know, is Taoiseach. Has he got anyone that he needs to consult with? Who are his subordinates? In other words, who are in government with him, and who's got the most power, the second most power, and then who's got power in a sequence, so one after the other. So you just do a basic diagram on who's in power in Ireland. And again, use Google Scholar.com for that, or Wikipedia. So show a diagram showing how North Korea is ruled. So then have a look into Google to see how North Korea is ruled. You'll find out it's a dictator that rules it, that they don't have democracy, that they can't vote in their leader, that he's a leader because his dad was a leader. Maybe his dad took leadership by power, by force. Mention 5 things you know about the European Union. Okay, so just tap in again to Google Scholar, 5 things about the European Union. And reflect and discuss what you think is good or bad about democracy. Have that discussion with your SNA. Always get your supporting teacher there to help you with any problems you have with this. Get them to help as well. Include them. Ask them for advice. If you find that your supporting teacher doesn't understand or doesn't know what's expected from me as teacher, make sure, obviously, one of you let me know that so we can help. Okay, so Mention 5 things you know about the United Nations. So that's a big organization to help try and keep peace in the world. So write 5 things you know about it. And then list 5 things that you've learned and found interesting about Northern Ireland and the Troubles. Okay, so what's Northern Ireland? Who rules it? What troubles have there been in the past? Little things like that will be fine. Okay, and then we get on to a new section within strand 3. Again, there's 3 strands, there's different parts within each strand. And law is a big strand. You'll see I did videos up on law to make it easier for you, up on my website, and up on Schoology. And we also have our Google Drives as well, haven't we? So, number 1, reflect on why any laws are important and the ones you as a student have to follow. And then present this using Google Slides, or again, pictures or audio. But what you're trying to get at here is laws that are important for Ireland to function well. So, for example, it's a law that you can't rob things. Why is that a law? What would happen if there wasn't a law for that? It's just reflect and think about what the world would be like without laws. And number 2, know the difference between consumers, local laws, criminal law, civil law, EU and international law. So even if you did a line or 2 about each one, consumer law is to protect us when we're buying things. Local laws are to protect things like, say, for example, beaches. There's bylaws there on the beaches. You can't do scooters, noisy scooters, say, after a certain time at night time for obvious reasons. It's noisy for neighbours. Criminal law then is like the theft, murder. Civil laws like divorce and marriage and buying a house. EU and international law, we get laws from the European Union and we get laws from the international world that we have to abide by. Okay, so write up 2 points about each, find a picture about each which symbolises the organisation that looks after any aspect of law. The role of media in democracy then is the final thing that we look at. So part A, you could write down, or again using audio, the pros and cons of freedom of the media. Give examples, give 3 of each. So why is it good to have freedom of media? How can it get, say, some leaders in trouble when you've got freedom of press as well? Should it be monitored more? Should it be look at fake media on different social media apps? How could we regulate or monitor more to make sure we're getting the truth? I suppose is the important thing, isn't it, when it comes to the media? The media means television, newspapers, social media. How do we get our news? So understand the difference between fake news and good news and give 3 examples of each. Okay, we just spoke about that. And listen and learn about the role of media in a social justice movement, a political election or referendum, a criminal investigation or an environmental movement. Okay, well, don't complicate that too much yourself. Just try to keep it simple there. And listen and learn about the role of media, say, in a political election. How did Donald Trump get elected? How did Leo Varadkar get elected? For example, Leo has a Twitter account. For example, Donald Trump, the current president of America, has a Twitter account. He uses social media. Barack Obama, they say that one of the main reasons he got into power was the use of social media and to get his message out there. So there's good and bad with social media, isn't there? Okay, but the truth is the important thing from that. We're getting experts and the truth from our media. That's what's important. So it's important to reflect again about each of these different sections and write down what you think, what are your opinions, and what have you learned. Okay, that wraps up priority learning units and actions for my JCSP students in CSP. Thanks for listening. Keep safe. Bye-bye.